In the heart of New Delhi, a truly brutal crime takes place inside a secure home. The killer, he takes very careful steps to just vanish. But you know, in our super connected world, every single action leaves an echo, a little digital ghost. Today, we're going to explore the incredible story of how police followed a very faint digital trail to solve a shocking murder.
So, get this. The suspect was an insider. He knew the family. He knew their routine. He sold his phone, used cash, fled the city. He really thought he was a ghost. So how on earth did investigators manage to find his exact location and arrest him in less than half a day? Well, that's the story of this digital hunt. So, our story begins in Kailash Hills, a pretty upscale neighborhood in South Delhi. On a Wednesday morning, a senior Indian Revenue Service officer and his wife, they come back home from the gym. But what they find is a scene of just unimaginable horror. Their daughter, who had been home alone, had been brutally attacked.
The victim was this brilliant 22-year-old woman. An engineering graduate from the prestigious IIT, and she was studying for the incredibly competitive civil services exam. She had this amazingly bright future ahead of her, and it was just violently stolen from her in the one place she should have been the safest, her own home.
Now, this is the part that's just chilling. The timeline. The suspect gets into the house at 6:39 in the morning, and he's gone by 7:20 a.m. That's it. He was in and out in just over 40 minutes. This wasn't some random thing. This was a calculated, planned strike, timed for exactly when he knew she would be alone.
The initial investigation, and later the post-mortem report, they confirmed just how brutal this attack was. The victim had been strangled with a mobile phone charging cable, and had also suffered severe injuries from being hit with a heavy object.
Okay, so you have to understand, the police weren't just looking for a killer. At this point, they were basically hunting a ghost. The suspect was actively trying to erase himself, taking very specific steps that he thought would make him completely invisible to law enforcement.
So, the prime suspect was pretty quickly identified as Rahul Meena. He was 23 years old, and he'd actually worked for the family for about a year. Now, here's the key part. He had been fired just a few weeks before all this because of his gambling habits and for mishandling money. But of course, his insider knowledge of the home, of the family's routine, that was still a huge threat.
And Meena, wow, he was already on the run for something else. Just hours before the murder, he had allegedly committed a rape in another state. To cover his tracks, he sold his phone, he hired a van to get to Delhi but then bolted without paying the driver, and he used a hidden spare key to get into the apartment. Once inside, he actually changed his clothes to alter his appearance, and then he took off with cash and valuables. He was methodically, step-by-step, building this wall of deception.
But here's the thing. For all his planning, for all his efforts to go dark, the suspect made just three, critical digital errors. And these 3 little breadcrumbs were all the police needed to hunt him down.
This is exactly where the ghost started to leave a trail. This whole massive case really boiled down to 3 tiny digital clues: a stolen phone, a hotel's public Wi-Fi, and a single social media chat. Okay, so first up, the phone. Meena was smart enough to sell his own device, right? He knew it could be tracked. But he was still using a different handset, one he'd actually stolen during a previous crime. He figured a phone that wasn't registered to him would make him invisible. Now for his second mistake. He checks into a hotel in Dwarka to lay low. He connects that stolen phone to the hotel's public Wi-Fi, probably thinking he's getting online without a traceable SIM card. But what he did next on that network? Well, that would be his ultimate undoing.
And that brings us to the final, fatal clue. While he was on that Wi-Fi network, he used Instagram to message a relative. That single act of communication, as simple as it sounds, created the exact digital footprint the police needed. It was the crack in that wall of deception he had worked so hard to build.
So, this is where the technical side of the investigation gets really cool. Police analyzed something called an Internet Protocol Detail Record, or IPDR. Now, don't worry about the jargon. Think of it like a digital log or a receipt. Every single time a device connects to a network, it leaves a trace. By analyzing the data from his Instagram chat, police could follow that trace right back to its source, the Wi-Fi router at that hotel in Dwarka.
So, the IPDR gave police a location, a massive breakthrough. But now they had to confirm that their guy was actually there. And this is where that high-tech digital work combines with old-fashioned, on-the-ground police investigation to finally close the net. And boom, security footage gave them that crucial visual confirmation. It captured Mina entering the building in one set of clothes and then leaving just over 40 minutes later in a completely different outfit, carrying a backpack he didn't have when he went in. This was clear proof of his intent to disguise himself and that a robbery had taken place.
And let me tell you, this was a massive effort. We're talking about 15 separate police teams being deployed. They meticulously went through footage from over 100 cameras, tracing the suspect's path from the crime scene and confirming all that digital evidence they had gathered.
And the result of all this seamless police work? Get this. Less than 12 hours after the victim's parents made their devastating discovery, police teams stormed the hotel in Dwarka and arrested a completely stunned Rahul Mina. His attempt to become a ghost had totally and completely failed.
So, with the suspect in custody, the big question shifted from how to why. What could possibly drive a former employee to commit such a violent and desperate act? The investigation quickly started to paint a pretty grim picture of a life in a downward spiral. Police recovered nearly 2.5 lakh rupees. That's 250,000 rupees, which Mina had stolen from a locker in the house. So the primary motive was clearly robbery, born from a really desperate need for money.
You see, this wasn't just some isolated event. It was really the culmination of a long downward spiral. Police described Mina as being addicted to online gambling and just buried in debt. It was this financial desperation that got him fired in the first place, and it's what ultimately drove him back to that house in a final, violent attempt to solve his problems.
The Kailash Hills murder case is, of course, a terrible tragedy, but it's also a stark reminder of a very modern truth. The suspect did everything he could think of to cover his tracks, to disconnect from the grid, and yet, a stolen phone, a free Wi-Fi connection, and a single social media message were all it took to lead police right to his door. It leaves us with a pretty critical question to think about. In a world that's woven together by all this invisible data, is it even possible to become a ghost anymore?